It's just 1 week till the US presidential election, and polls continue to point to a deadlocked race. For months, experts have been saying that the outcome is likely to come down to a tiny fraction of voters in a handful of decisive battleground states. Meanwhile, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are fighting for every vote with no room for error. In US politics, the term October surprise refers to an unexpected event in the final weeks of campaigning that can upend a candidate's chances and change the trajectory of the election. In 2016, a leaked recording of Donald Trump making lewd remarks didn't seem to hurt his campaign, but bombshell revelations that the FBI was investigating Hillary Clinton's handling of emails seemed to confirm voter mistrust of her. She lost the election despite polls predicting a win. So last weekend, Trump held a rally in the Democratic stronghold of New York, and he's been sharply criticised for, among other things, racist undertones. A comedian speaking ahead of Trump described the US territory of Puerto Rico as, quote, a floating island of garbage. Those remarks have been widely condemned, but today Trump doubled down and defended his rally.
I don't think anybody has ever seen anything like what happened the other night at Madison Square Garden. The love in that room, it was breathtaking. There's never been an event so beautiful. It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest, and it was my honor to be involved.
But many in the diverse Latino community see things very differently. Polls show Republicans had been making inroads among Latino voters, but the Trump rally has sparked a backlash, including in the must-win state of Pennsylvania, which is home to a large Puerto Rican community. Could this be an October surprise that hurts Trump's chances? Here's how some in the Latino community are reacting.
It's a joke that gave a real bad taste in my mouth because I'm Puerto Rican and I love my islands and my family, everybody is proud of Puerto Rico. And what the joke he did is backfire on him because it's not nice.
We're here to demand that not only this gentleman and Trump's campaign have a real apology, but also to ask that we are respected as American citizens that we are.
A presidential candidate in front of a debate, the entire country says the Haitians are eating cats and dogs. So it doesn't surprise me at all. It does not surprise me at all to see a person in his rallies talk about Puerto Rico in that way.
People are not talking a lot about politics on the streets, and but they're not very happy about Donald Trump.
All right, well, for more on this, we're joined by Fernando Tormos-Aponte, who's an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Pittsburgh in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. He specialises in Puerto Rican politics. Welcome to DW, Fernando. So, first and foremost, do you think the Puerto Rico comments could be an October surprise for Trump?
No, I mean, elections are decided by a confluence of factors. And when these elections are so close, as we see now, one of these factors changing at this late stage could shape the outcome of an election.
Now, you're in Pennsylvania, which is one of these must-win states for both campaigns. They've been campaigning hard there. It also has a large Puerto Rican community. So tell us more about their political leanings.
Yes, what we observe in the case of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania and Latinos more generally is that they are overwhelmingly supportive of the Democratic Party. However, it is important to also note that only 40% of eligible Latinos went out to vote in the 2020 presidential election. So insofar as these incendiary comments can trigger electoral mobilization and turnout, it could have an impact on the electoral outcome of Pennsylvania. And in doing so, it could shape the presidential election.
Yeah, of course, because, I mean, it could come down to several thousand votes. Now, some Republicans have been trying to downplay what they say was intended as a joke. But that wasn't the only divisive language used on stage or, in fact, in the campaign as a whole, right?
Correct. And I think what's interesting about this particular case is that this is a reminder of the scandalous behavior that folks are used to observing from the presidential candidate Donald Trump. And it is a reminder that comes only days prior to Election Day. Sometimes scandals are some things that people tend to forget over time. In Donald Trump's case, they are overwhelmed by the amount of scandalous behavior that they observe in this candidate. But when this happens so close and it becomes such a viral event that people find out about and it triggers emotions and can trigger mobilization, it could really have a detrimental impact to this campaign. So I was quite surprised that these remarks were made, and the Trump campaign's efforts to try to walk them back may not be very effective because it's harder to reach the amount of people that were reached by the remarks themselves and try to walk that back. So people will likely find out about the remarks, but they are unlikely to find out about these lukewarm efforts to try to walk back the comments.
Now, Fernando, Latino voters it's often simplified into this sort of block of Latino voters. But of course, it's a very diverse group of people in the United States. Can you explain to us a little bit more about those differences and how their political leanings differ?
Absolutely. It's important to note that Latinos are not a homogeneous group, and where we see an overwhelming support for the Democratic Party is among Mexicans and Puerto Ricans, but we've seen other ethnic groups within the broader Latino pan-ethnicity to have varying levels of support for the Democratic Party. And we also see a large share of support among Latino youth for the Democratic Party, less so among the elderly population. We also see differences among Latino men and Latino women, where we see that Latino women are overwhelmingly supportive of the Democratic Party, and Trump actually performs a little better when it comes to Latino men. So it's a very homogeneous population, but insofar as something can trigger them to mobilize as a bloc, that is where we see the potential of an impact on an electoral outcome like we might see in the presidential elections this year.
Now, you've broken it down for us a little bit there, but polls are suggesting, for example, that Latino support will go back to sort of this broad term again for Kamala Harris isn't as strong as it has been for Democratic candidates in the past. Why do you think that is?
I think that, again, there's so much scandalous behavior that the memory of Donald Trump, the person who used incendiary language to refer to a number of ethnic minority groups, may have faded over time. Even something as recent as his remarks about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, claiming erroneously that they were eating cats and dogs. These things might fade. We also know, for instance, that folks are inundated by these news. And Trump has argued that all of the cases that have been brought against him are a case of lawfare, that he's the victim of persecution by his political opponent. And that has mobilized a number of folks to sympathize with the Trump candidate. We also know that Trump has argued somewhat effectively that rising inflation is the Democrats' fault. He's also deployed discourse rather effectively about a crisis at the border. So these are potential factors that have allowed him to gain some favor within that Latino population. But these events may counteract those gains that he had made in the last few months.
We'll leave it there, Fernando. Great to have you on the show. Fernando Tormos-Aponte joining us from the University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. Take care.
We're joined now by Rodrigo Dominguez Villegas, Research Director at UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Institute. Joining us from Springfield, Massachusetts. Good to have you with us, Rodrigo. With a few days now to digest the comments made at his rally, how do you think these comments have landed with the Latino community?
all, we have seen a very strong reaction from the whole Latino community and at different levels, from celebrities coming out against these really awful comments about the island of Puerto Rico, to political figures and, of course, voters who are not just only Puerto Rican voters, but also broadly Latino voters who were reminded of the rhetoric that Trump used back in 2016 when he launched his first political campaign, to now bringing it back to the top of people's minds.
Trump once famously said he could fire bullets down Fifth Avenue and his supporters wouldn't mind. Can he host an event where a key voting group is at best made fun of, at worst stereotyped and badly offended, and still expect support from those voters?
Well, this late in the game, it is all about a turnout, and the two campaigns trying to make sure that voters come out and actually cast a ballot. I don't think it's going to be about persuasion. I think the people who have decided that are going to vote for Donald Trump have already made up their mind. However, there are a lot of people who were possibly on the fence on whether to vote or not to vote, and those are the people that we're seeing that are very energized right now on actually coming out and casting a ballot against Donald Trump.
Rodrigo, we hear of so many key voting groups in this election. Is it really possible that the Puerto Rican vote could have a say in who wins the White House?
Absolutely. So, for instance, in Pennsylvania, which is one of the swing states, that back in 2020 was decided by less than 81,000 votes. In 2016, it was around 44,000 votes. Puerto Ricans make up. There's 300,000 Puerto Ricans just in that state, and so their numbers are just enough to be able to swing the balance between one candidate and another. There's other states, including Georgia, that are also swing states where Puerto Ricans make up a large portion of Latino voters.
How strong is the Latino support, looking on the other side, for Kamala Harris? Is there a common tendency among the Latino states, if we want to call them that, in this election at all?
Well, most polls are showing right now that Kamala Harris enjoys around a 20-point lead over Donald Trump among Latino voters. It's roughly a 60-40 breakdown between those two, with Latino voters supporting, the majority of them supporting Kamala Harris all across the swing state. However, this support is a little bit smaller than what we saw back in 2020 in terms of support for Joe Biden. However, still the vast majority of Latino voters are saying that they're going to vote for Kamala Harris and for Democratic candidates down ballot too.
Broadly speaking, and you speak to that a little bit, the Latino voters were once hugely, very, very strongly and reliably counted in that Democratic corner. Why has that shift been away, and do you expect that shift, as you alluded to continue, and this election could be another milestone that marks their migration to the more conservative side of politics?
Well, it's important to remember that throughout, the past 3-4 decades, around 35% of Latino voters have supported Republican candidates throughout. It was just that in 2016 and 2012, a high, an abnormal number and proportion supported the Democratic candidates. So back Barack Obama in 2012 and Hillary Clinton in 2016. So some of that shift back to the Republican Party is what we call returning to the mean, returning home. Some Latino voters who just couldn't digest Donald Trump in his first presidential run when he started his campaign denigrating Mexicans and other Latino groups, just going back to that Republican field. Now, there's a little bit of another shift that we're seeing. Some of it has to do with Latino men, and surprisingly young Latino men who find in some of the messaging from Donald Trump, some comfort in terms of leadership. And of course, let's remember that the economic context that the United States is in the last 4 years, where high inflation meant that a lot of people were, having difficulty meeting ends meet, also helps in terms of the macroeconomic and the macros of the election, does help in a lot of people seeing Harris being the part of the current administration that brought up that high inflation. And so that's why we're seeing some of those numbers. We don't expect that shift to continue majorly, but the polls are showing 2 or 3 points less support for Harris than for Biden back in 2020.
Rodrigo Dominguez Villegas, Research Director at UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Institute. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.